You are listening to FirstGen Healing, a podcast on Latinx healing and awakening journeys. My name is Priscila Luna. I am your intuitive prima and also the host of this podcast. And I am so excited, FirstGen, because today we are talking about awakening. Yay! And so I want to talk through a little bit about what awakening meant or has meant over the years for me. Like, what has that looked like? Not necessarily the full-on story, although I am totally down to do like a series or something like that about my experience of an awakening. If you guys want to hear it, of course. Pero more so kind of like my interpretation of it and how it has evolved over the years and maybe the different types of awakening journeys that I've come across. Because what I noticed is that online, when you Google like an awakening, there's a lot of videos on the different phases of awakening, but I feel like there isn't that many videos about maybe the different types of them or different experiences and interpretations of awakening. And the reason that I know now that there are many different kinds is because when I started the podcast and I set out to do a podcast on healing and awakening journeys, what I imagined was one thing and what ended up happening was another. And that's kind of what I want to talk about. And it gave me like good insight into the fact that people interpret awakening in many different ways, right? So, for example, a couple of years ago when I started this podcast, I feel like I had been on my awakening journey for maybe I started this in fall of 2022. So, and I feel like I started my awakening or like the dark night of the soul, if you've ever heard of that, in 2018. So maybe 4 years had gone by. And so how I interpreted awakening at that point is when I had a series of a lot of things, there we go, of a lot of things happen in my life. For example, a breakup of my own, my parents' divorce, different family members passing away. It felt like it was just like one hard thing after the other. And how it felt was like it really felt like the rug was pulled from under me. The way that I viewed the world, my place in it, the universe, how I understood like who I was and what I wanted, it all kind of dissolved, without me being able to catch onto it. It felt like quicksand or it felt like clouds where it was just like I couldn't grasp onto the things that I knew anymore. So for example, like the concept of family, right? That was a big one, or of love and my future. Those things started to kind of crumble before my eyes, and the concept of like who I was and where I was headed started to become really blurry. The road kind of disappeared. And at that point, I remember that I had this boss who was a little bit of a hippie, pero one of the things that I remember is that as that was happening, like, to be honest, in that point of my journey, I was going through a harsh phase of, I think I was fighting not heading into a phase of like depression and maybe what some people interpret as like the dark night of the soul. So I think like estaba echando ganas and I was really trying to not go there. Maybe I felt it coming, but I was trying to hold on to the things that I could keep moving forward, like my job, So I was really working hard and I was getting promotions at work and I channeled so much of my energy there. But one of the things that I told my boss at that time was that everything kind of looked fake to me. So I don't know if this has happened to any of you guys. I would love to know, by the way, if as I'm talking anything resonates, like let me know. I have been craving, I guess, getting in touch with or getting to know other Latinos, Latinas, Latines on not healing journeys, awakening journeys. So feel free to let me know if anything resonates or if you've been through any of this stuff. But I told him like everything feels fake in the sense of when I would look at a tree or a cloud or a flower, for some reason it looked fake to me. Like if it wasn't real or organic, like it didn't grow, like everything was just kind of placed here, kind of like a Legoland or Monopoly. It just felt so, no sé, como fake. And my boss at the time, I feel like he was like, oh, this girl's going through an awakening, right? Which I didn't know that that was what was happening to me. But I did tell him like I was starting to question like our purpose here and us as humans and what does that mean, you know? And so he gave me this book, which I'll try to remember and put in the description. I think it was like Source Code or something like that. It was a really big book. And I I don't think I was on his level in the way that that book is, you know, but that book, I started to go through it and it talked about like the pineal gland and the calcification of it and like pyramids and real history and aliens and a lot of like what people would consider conspiracy theories, and just like opening my mind up to a lot of strange concepts that I personally had never heard about, you know, especially as a first gen Latina. Like these were not things that I had come across in any conversation with family or with friends even, honestly. um and so I would say, like, in the beginning of my journey, when I thought of awakening, that's what I thought of. It was like opening myself up to all of these concepts. There was a streaming service. I don't know if I think it's still around. Yeah, it's called Gaia. And I remember coming across that and consuming so many of those videos. And Gaia is kind of like a Netflix, but for like conscious thinking and energy and that kind of stuff, right? So I purchased like a subscription and I watched like Joe Dispenza videos and I watched just videos about many different, like deGrasse, I think it is, different people that are very knowledgeable in their worlds and that talked a very different language that I did. But at that point, I remember just being so interested in all of these new concepts, you know? And something within me was so curious because in that time of deep transformation and transition for me, one of the things that I had started to do was print out these pictures, of it's kind of like I think I found them like on Pinterest or Google or something. I don't remember, but it was pictures that kind of depicted how, as humans, like we were polluting the world and we were so attached to social media and we were living this life that was so disconnected from nature and reality and a distorted world. And I remember I would see those pictures and I felt it like deep within me. And it's so funny because now to me it makes so much sense that that's the kind of stuff that I was being attracted to. Like now knowing who become and turned into and like my authentic self. But back then, truly see it as like I was glitching. And sometimes I call my like listeners or followers on TikTok like fellow glitches because I feel like when we start to awaken sometimes we start to glitch in and out of reality, and reality in quotation marks, you know, like societal reality, the reality that was created and is believed into by many, many humans right now. But I feel like when you start to awaken, at least this version of awakening, the one that I was going through, I was glitching into a different like experience, or it's kind of like a longing for a different type of life. And mind you, this is like 2017ish, 2018, where I don't feel like it was as trendy to be woke and like crystals and all of that tarot and energy stuff. I feel like it probably existed and there was so much more than I even knew about, but I don't feel like it was mainstream. I don't like right now I see so many commercials referencing stuff and like marketing and branding that has to do with like crystals and peace and you know like internal peace and mindfulness, that kind of stuff. But back then that wasn't as popular. So so yeah, I feel like it kind of started from there, right? And then it's evolved. I mean, at some point I remember I went vegetarian, for example, because I started to watch documentaries on like food, right? And the industrialization of that, and how we are so disconnected from how our ancestors used to gather their food and antibiotics and all of these things, you know. And so I would love to know if you find yourself in this phase of the journey where you're truly just opening up to all of these rabbit holes. And if so, I want to give you a little bit of I don't know if a warning is the right word, but What I recognize in that phase too is that if you tend to be an anxious person or if you're highly empathetic, sometimes you can burn yourself out in that process. So, because we have such a big capacity for empathy, for empathizing, and for understanding. Like your soul is trying to find what makes sense now, right? Or your being is trying to find, like, well, what is, like, if the life that I lived isn't making sense for me anymore, then what does make sense, right? And there's this questioning phase. But I guess just be mindful of how many rabbit holes you enter and how deep you go into these things, because it can become kind of like a dopamine hit where you're just kind of like searching for the next big thing that scares you, that frightens you, that puts fear into you, or and then you can end up being like kind of like congelado, you end up freezing from like everything that you're finding out about the world. But it's definitely, I think, part of a journey sometimes that many of us go through, which is like the questioning phase. So when it comes to awakening, I think that some people see it as that, like awakening to the fact that, whoa, it kind of feels like I've been sleeping. I was young and I kind of adopted and believed or was conditioned in so many ways, and I didn't question that, right? I think that a lot of us do that, where it's kind of like we don't question the school system, we don't question the 9 to 5 life, we don't question that we need to, in quotations, a house and a car and another car and a bigger house, and we're kind of like stuck in this rat race that we are conditioned into, and we don't question it. The student loans, the debt, right? It's kind of like so much that is normalized that we start to believe that that is what life is. We've bought so much into it that at some point we measure our worth and our success, again, quote unquote success, based on how much or how little we have obtained in these scales. So I started to recognize that. But as you may or may not know, when you get awareness, when you are starting to get these downloads, for example, right, which are kind of like thoughts or epiphanies, things start to click within your mind. Sometimes a lot of that can happen in your mind, but because of the deep depth of the conditioning that's happened in our lives, it takes a lot longer for it to seep into our existence, our reality, and who we are. It's kind of like hearing a theory, and being like, "Oh, that's an interesting theory. Something in me says that there's truth in that." But you leave it kind of apart from you. Like, "Oh, it's a theory that's out there, but it's not already something that you apply in your day-to-day life, right?" So let's say, for example, you start to come into awareness about, like, it's important that you are mindful of how you speak to yourself, right? So like how you talk about yourself and how you talk to yourself changes the way that you experience life. So it might be like something within you says, that feels true, but I don't know how to apply it into my day to day. And so you continue your life kind of normal. And that's in the back of your mind, but it hasn't been integrated, right? It hasn't been like integrated and it hasn't become you. So, yeah, I think that there's a phase where that happens, where it's just kind of like you come into awareness of a lot of things, but you're not ready or at the point where you're embodying these things, where they look and seem like truth to you. And so there is so many layers to awakening, because I think like that there's awakening, for example, that is spiritual, and awakening that is not. And so, for example, I feel like when I thought of awakening, I always saw it as a spiritual awakening. I thought that anyone who thought that they were awakening was like on a spiritual level. And when I say spiritual, I don't mean like religious. I mean as like a soul, right? Like coming into the knowing or the remembering that, wait, I'm a human, but I'm also a soul. Do I believe that? Am I a soul? And kind of like questioning like the soul and maybe extraterrestrial life, and like starting to think in terms of the universe and energy and all of this stuff. That's what I thought everyone thought of when they thought of a spiritual awakening. But when I started to do this podcast, I started to recognize that some people, and maybe you included, look at awakening as kind of like an awareness, kind of the lights are switched on of, oh, I need to change this pattern. There are cycles that are repeated in my family line that I would like to break. um yeah, kind of awakening to knowings or patterns or behaviors that you maybe didn't notice before, you know? So I also find that fascinating because, like I mentioned, when I thought of healing and awakening journeys, I thought we would all be talking about energy and vibration and all of these things that are so vast, you know? But there exists a different type of awakening, which is not spiritual, which is not tied to that necessarily. And it's more so based on like consciousness, awareness, coming into the knowing of, right? Awakening to the fact that this relationship isn't serving me, awakening to the fact that this friendship is toxic, no sé, that kind of stuff, you know? So if you've made it this far, I would love to know if you resonate with awakening, which one do you resonate with most? More of a spiritual awakening or like an awakening without the spiritual side? I would be really interested to know. So if you are on a platform where you can comment, which is Spotify or YouTube, I would love to know. I don't think Apple Podcast lets you comment, but you can DM me or you can go to one of those platforms and let us know as well. I've had some people ask me like, how did you start your awakening? I want to start mine. And it's so interesting to me because I'm like, I wonder what you think awakening is like. And like, I wonder what you think you're going to gain from it, you know, because awakening for me was so life changing. And I mean, now I feel like there's gratitude for that journey, but it's so hard and it would never be something that I triggered for myself or like initiated, you know? So, oh, that there's something else that I want to talk about. When I was going through this, I talked to my boss. He gave me this book. I started looking into it and I was like, whoa, like this is a lot, you know, like the pineal gland and the water and how your fluoride is calcifying your pineal gland and all of that kind of stuff. It felt like a lot of information, and some of it felt like kind of talking about a foreign subject where it was just kind of like everything went over my head, you know. But then I think for some people, awakening also includes like plant medicine, ¿verdad? Like people have this longing and this feeling of like, I just want to make sense of this all. I want to know why I'm here, maybe wanting to find like that purpose or their place in the world. And I imagine there are many different routes to getting to the point where you want to figure that out for yourself, you know? Like, and like I said, I think it makes sense because when I was going through the depth of it, it felt like I was on this free fall, and maybe what I used to be able to grab onto as my identity, as who I was being taken away from me in a sense, you know, what I knew as life and what I had projected onto my future, it felt like it was being taken away from me. It was being dissolved faster than I can hold on to it. And so it's kind of like I needed something new to grasp on, you know? And for me, like it did end up involving plant medicine at some point. But I imagine too that some of you guys like have never experienced that, or maybe you're curious about it, or maybe you're experts in it, you know? So that's what I love about like healing and awakening journeys is that they really are so layered and there is so much to it. But I do think like there are similar maybe roots or end desires at the end of it all. It's like making sense of this life, understanding your place in it, feeling grounded in something, whether it's you or the universe or what you believe in or what you understand or in the change you want to make in this world, right? So it's super, super cool. And I feel like it's such a vast world. Like awakening is so vast, and I could have never imagined how vast it was. And I think like it's so cool because truly I feel like it's like I used to hear things like your vibe attracts your tribe, you know, and that people can only meet you as far as they've met themselves. These sayings that you start to hear, alignment, sovereignty, you know, ¿qué más? High vibe, low vibration, just different things that you hear throughout your journey where at some point maybe they don't make sense, some point they make perfect sense, some point they lose their sense, you know, like it's such a ever evolving journey for yourself, for others. And I also love that um it's a weird feeling because I just feel like the more I've gotten into it, the more I discover about it, the more people I find that are on it, and I'm like, whoa, was it a matter of me moving forward, or is the world actually changing, or what's happening? Like I said in the beginning, many years ago, I had a hard time finding people that were like-minded. It felt like I've always kind of been on a different channel, I think, than people my age. But I will say that for a long time I was able to mask, so I would do the going out and the getting drunk. But at some point, my journey kind of asked me to stop drinking. Like, and not that I would do it a lot. Well, like, let's say weekend drinking, like going out and having fun and that kind of stuff. At some point, that same substance, which I had started to learn that was poison and it wasn't good for you and that kind of stuff, I remember trying to continue on this path, feeling like, well, I don't have any friends that are like that woke or that living that life. So I kept trying to still go out with my friends, to still get drunk and have fun, and it stopped being fun for me. It's like I was so conscious or aware when I would go out and I would just see people and I would be like, I can't believe that at some point I found this so fun. And kind of forcing myself to get drunk and try to enjoy the thing the next day would just make me feel worse. And then similarly, at some point, I started to smoke, right? To garden, let's call it. So for some period of my journey, I feel like I was going through so much, and like a lot of anxiety, a lot of feelings, a lot that I needed something. And I ended up going with gardening, which is so interesting. I have a whole journey with gardening itself. Porque at some point I was so against it, and then it was like my saving grace for some time. But similarly, you'll hear some people say that the plant medicine sometimes lets you know, like, it's time to let it go, that it's time for you to move on, that it no longer is your teacher or you no longer need it for this part of the journey. And that also happened to me with gardening. So as much as honestly, I do think it served me in my journey, and I actually want to make an episode about that. I think there's so much stigma in our communities, obviously, right, about certain things, the unknown in general. I think anything that is unknown to our cultura, it's kind of like, ay, eso es del diablo, or eso son cosas malas, na da da da, like, and there's a lot of stigmas and things that are kind of out there. But how I experienced it was like, I really felt like I was sinking, in those moments where nothing was making sense. It's so interesting because to the outside world, it was like I had gotten my dream job around that time. I was traveling for work. Like, things looked good. I had my own apartment. I was saving, like I was having a good saving and paying back credit card debt, and it just, to the outside world, it looked really good. And so those around me really couldn't help me through the sinking feeling that I had. I felt like I'm sinking and I don't know how to not. And for me, gardening was like kind of saved me in a little bit. It helped me stay afloat in some way, and it opened my mind over and over and over again. I had so many epiphanies while on that, so many downloads. I started to do like creative stuff and garden, and so when I would garden and do creativity, I would like get into flow state. It was so interesting. Thanks to gardening, like, I started to feel my own energy in my body. I started to become aware of my energy body, if you've ever heard about that. And sorry, by the way, you guys, I know that I'm kind of a little bit all over the place, but that's actually how I wanted to do this specific episode before maybe going into my story and like dive deeping into that doing like a dive deep into that, because I want to touch on like the different things that I've experienced and also have heard that other people have experienced. Because I think that's like when you're awakening, like, if I were to just say my story and that's it, I wouldn't be exposing you, right, to like maybe the different ways and the different things, and also like new perspectives of what you're experiencing. So back to what I was saying about gardening. At that point, I remember I held so much shame about what I was doing and what I was going through. Because, like I said, I really wanted to uphold that image that I had of like Priscilla, like it is, has a good job and is doing great in corporate and like that kind of version of me. And yet at home, I was like feeling like I was all over the place, like I was going a little bit crazy, and that there was just so much happening within me. And that was a point in my life where I became like this open-minded sponge that was willing to open my mind up to so much, because again, I was trying to find and make sense of what made sense to me, you know? Um, and so the perspective shift that happened for me then is I held so much judgment against gardening because of the way that my family saw it, the way, like, kind of what I heard from them, as well as what I had experienced with an ex where I felt like he was abusing gardening, you know. And then in the end, it was so surprising to me that I ended up kind of really becoming a gardener, let's call it that. But it really served me in my path. But at some point, it told me, like, hey, we need to stop. Similar to alcohol, which is so interesting. So that's also something to be mindful of, right? Like listening when you're getting those signals, listening and understanding that at the end of the day, I truly feel like awakening is meant to give you your power back. It's meant to set you free in some way, or at least show you that you've been living in a bird cage, you know, because I think that a lot of us feel the bird cage, we can't see it. And since everyone, like, you might be like, don't you feel the bird cage? Like that we're in a bird cage, and people around you might be like, what are you talking about? You're crazy, you know? Or look, like a party, or look, a new shiny thing. Let's go buy that purse. I don't know. Like, that movie, there's so much to be distracted by in this world and entertained, and to keep you in the same birdcage. And I actually read a quote. It was like, no matter how much you decorate the cage, it's still a cage, something like that. Or just because you make the cage pretty doesn't mean you've left it. And I just, that resonated so much, right? Because I think that sometimes we do that in the journey. We're like perceiving it and we start to see it, and it's so hard to get out because it's so scary. But I do think that awakening gives you that power of saying, hey, it's okay to exit that birdcage. It's okay to believe in yourself enough. And also, like, it's like a validation or a confirmation of a knowing that you've had maybe for a really long time, but that you've put to the side because you couldn't find someone else to validate it for you, you know? So I feel like awakening, sometimes it pushes you to an extreme to where you validate it for yourself and you recognize for yourself, like, oh, like this is what I've been feeling for a really long time. And again, I'm kind of going based off of what I know and what I've experienced, but beyond that, like, there's so many layers to it, you know? Like, maybe that some people stay there, but I continue to search. And so without realizing it, for example, I started to learn about being an empath and highly sensitive, and then moved into, like, oh my gosh, I think I'm highly intuitive, you know? And that's kind of the path and journey that I've been going on now with my most recent, for example, name change, you know? So for the 2 years that I have been coaching FirstGens, at first it was like for like a Latina coach, then it was Latina intuitive guide, and then I think earlier this year, maybe like the spring of this year, I was like, you know what? I want to be the intuitive prima. And even that has been like stepping deeper into this path and recognizing, like, whoa, what is energy and what are energy patterns? And how come I can feel what others are feeling in their body and mind? Like, it's been an ongoing journey. And so awakening and what that means to me has been ever evolving. And yeah, I think it's super, super interesting. I never get tired of talking about it with people. I love to hear like the journey that other people are on. And typically I'd say those that I have worked one-on-one with, maybe the initial focus or focal point is healing, you know, because at the end of the day, I think a lot of what I talk about is being a first gen, kind of freeing yourself from people pleasing and being that parentified child that became really responsible from a young age. And so you don't know yourself, right? You haven't gone on self-discovery journey. It's hard for you to prioritize yourself. But I think part of what's pulling you in the direction of doing those things is the desire to know yourself deeply. And so when you're wanting to know yourself deeply, I feel like you start to come into the knowing of all of these other things, or you start to get curious about them, you know. But it's a process. It's a process because if you're prioritizing other people's opinions of you, then it's really hard for you to explore the things that are calling your name, right? Because like you're trying to not shake up anything and the interpretation of who you are, or even your own judgments. Like maybe you feel shame for wanting to stray on a different path, or being interested in something that you've been told is malo, and so it's like freeing yourself. First you have to free yourself from some of that conditioning and some of that that's deeply embedded within us. You have to start to let that go in order for you to be like, what am I interested in? If I quiet all of those voices down and I start to tune into my like inner poder and who I really am, what am I interested in? What do I want to learn about? What has been calling my name that I haven't been able to like dive into? And so anywho, what I was saying is that like with my one-on-one clients, especially the ones that I've gotten the opportunity to work with for a little bit longer, you know, there starts to be tinges and hints of awakening in there, because they start to do mindfulness practices and they start to quiet other people's voices. And so they start to tap into their inner poder and get to know themselves. And so they start hearing their intuition a little bit more, and then their energy. And so it's this really cool unraveling of like becoming who you really are and trusting who you are, trusting that your instincts are right, that your intuition is typically right. That takes some time, because that's scary. It's scary to go from trusting others and their authority and their voice and their opinion of what you should do and how you should do it, and moving into your voice, your authority, and who you are, But it's very, very beautiful. And so actually, before I keep going, I do want to announce and share that I am opening up 2 spots for my 3-month mentorship program, which is called Pasos Firmes. And it goes very well aligned with what I just talked about. And so basically, I called it Pasos Firmes because the intent of this program is for you to start taking steps that are rooted. So steps, pasos, firmes, rooted in who you really are and what you really want. And that only comes when you begin to prioritize yourself, you dive deeper into self-discovery, and you open your mind and your future to a projection of who you really are, and not a projection that was put onto you, and there are many different versions of that I have worked with people through, but I'm excited because I just closed off or finished off sessions with a couple of clients. So I will be opening up 2 spots for that program. And if you are interested, I am including the link to schedule an introduction call in the description, as well as a discount code that you'll be able to apply if you choose to move forward with the program. So since this is my birthday month, I decided to do a birthday discount, and that same code you can use towards any of my intuitive sessions. So if you're like, I feel like I'm not ready for a 3-month program, but I do want some support and guidance in my journey, or things are getting blurry and I need some clarity, I do have one-on-one intuitive sessions called Corazón a Corazones. And I also have a 3-session bundle with an intro call, which is a pretty good deal. So the cool part is you can use that discount code for any of those things that I have mentioned. But the program Pasos Firmes, since it's more of a long-term commitment, then I do like a complimentary introduction call where you and I talk. You tell me what you're going through, the type of support that you're seeking. I let you know if I feel like the program aligns with that. And if you decide that yes, then you can use the code and sign up for the program, for the 3-month program. So I'm so excited to announce that and share that with you guys, because I tend to not work with a lot of people at the same time, since I am deeply invested in your journey and I give you a lot of my energy. I don't like to overwork myself in that sense. And honestly, it's really beautiful. There are client reviews on the site that I'm going to link in the description, so you can get more information on it. And if you have any questions, let me know. But also, like I said, that introduction call is a good moment for you to ask questions, for me to get to know you, for you to get to know me, and for both of us to decide if like that's something that you want to move forward with. Okay, so back to awakening talk. So to kind of wrap up this episode, like I said, I know it's a little bit all over the place, but I hope that you guys enjoyed it. I wanted to name the different things that I've come across, and I'll talk a little bit too about like the different types of awakening that some people on this podcast have brought to the table. So on this podcast, when I ask people, are you on a healing or awakening journey, or do you resonate with either of those most? When people say awakening, I'm like, ooh, like it's about to get juicy. We're going to talk about awakening. And it's been so interesting because everyone brings a different definition of that to the table. So, for example, right off the bat, I can tell you one of the first guests that I had was Victoria. Victoria is a spiritual coach, and she, like, when I thought of awakening, I would say like her story is kind of what I pictured at that point of what awakening was, right? So she talked about like how she started to hear her guides, and she started to do energy work, and she started to work with, I think, her chakra system. And now she helps people like work through that kind of stuff too. I feel like if you haven't heard her episode, that's a really good episode if you're into awakening. The other person that is more aligned with what traditionally I feel like awakening is, let's say, is Michael. So Michael Lemus also has 2 episodes with us, and he talks about his awakening journey and in his story. So that would be a couple of many episodes ago as well, but his name is Michael. But then there was people like Juan, for example. Juan, he came on the podcast and he said that um, he felt like he was going through an awakening journey. But what the type of awakening that he talked about was more like awakening to, so for example, kind of the work of Joe Dispenza, like meditation, self-development, being conscious of your unconscious mind and your thoughts, and that kind of stuff. So that was really interesting. Let me see. I'm trying to think if anyone else said they resonated with awakening. I know that there's a couple more people too, but I can't remember exactly, but it was surprising to me because it was like, oh, the type of awakening you're talking about is more like I'm awakening to the knowing of the cycles I need to break, which is also super interesting. No más que I think I lean towards spiritual awakening, or that's what came to mind automatically. And well, just kind of to wrap this episode up, like I said, I am happy to go into depth of anything that I talked about today. I'm looking forward to you guys providing feedback or questions or your version of awakening. I'm so excited for that. And I'm happy to do more episodes on this. But just to wrap this one up, I wanted to talk about the importance of finding community online or in person, whatever you can find, of people that get what you're going through. And the reason that I say that is because these journeys can be a whirlwind, right? A whirlwind. And if you're already on it, you probably know. But they take you left, right, up, down, backwards, forwards, all which ways. And it can feel really disorienting sometimes. It can feel confusing or blurry. And so I highly encourage even just following people online that you feel like have an idea of what you're going through, or talk about that kind of stuff. Porque even if it's not exactly the same, it's good for you to have like reference points, and to be validated in your experience. Similar to like healing, right? Like it's validating to hear, hey, I'm a first gen, and even though I love my parents, I still set boundaries with them. Whew, wow, okay, amazing. I'm not alone. I also feel like I need to do that. And now that you've said that you're doing it, I feel validated in the fact that I need to do that too. So similarly with awakening, I would say that. But also, I feel like it's really helpful to have people to provide that comfort in those moments where things are happening really fast or everything's being thrown at you. I just feel like it's a beautiful thing to have people to walk this journey through. And I was deeply reminded of that this past weekend. I attended a 3-day summit, and it was called Birthright. So many years ago, I found this influencer or person online. Her name is Sister Shanti, and I followed her. And back then, she was talking about like astrology, I think also awakening. And I started to follow her, and I started to attend like the different things that she would put out. And I really, really felt like she understood what I was going through. Obviously, her story is completely different, but I really appreciated the knowledge that she would share and how she would share her story. And it's been so cool because over the last couple of years, her audience has grown, her impact has grown and transformed so much. And she and her husband hosted this 3-day summit. And each day had like a different theme. So let me try to think if I can remember. the different themes. I know like the first one was I don't remember exactly. I know the first one was like your body. I don't know if it was like body elements and then like exiting the matrix type thing, but it's people that you would consider like new earth leaders or influencers or just people that are trying to explore new ways of living, connecting with life, deconditioning a lot of what we have been conditioned to, talking about like energy work and your connection to like, let's say, water or the earth, even like connection to the government and the rules and regulations to your energy. So much was talked about. And even though I attended it alone and I didn't know anyone else watching, there was 800 people as well that were live. I'm sure there was so many more that purchased it, but just seeing the chat and hearing the speakers talk, it honestly brought me to tears because I feel like sometimes when you're awakening, there's this, some of us, I feel like we miss, it's kind of like we feel like we're from somewhere else, like that this isn't home, that we miss home, you know? And even though we don't know what home is, and we like, it's like a longing for something that we've never experienced or known, or maybe we have, you know, quien sabe, pero at least in this human experience, in this lifetime, there's a longing. It's kind of like, dang, I miss that. I wish it was like that. Why are we in 2024 and people are still fighting over land and there's still food scarcity when really there shouldn't be, but there is? Everyone is struggling to pay their bills. Like, why haven't we figured it out by now, you know? Why aren't we all working as one? Why aren't we helping each other? Why can't we find peace in this world? Like, those kinds of thoughts start to happen when you awaken, right? You start to come into the knowing and the realization that it could be so much better or it could be so different. And yet so many of us, so many structures and the rhythm of life and everything just kind of keeps us going in this routine and this and these scarcity mindsets and like this and fear and all of these things, right? So anywho, it's really beautiful to see that there are a lot of people out there who are starting to awaken to these knowings, to awaken to the desire of this, and not only like wanting it but also putting action towards it, you know? And I know it's been hard for me to sometimes verbalize that that's the base of where I come from, or like that's at the base of why I do the things that I do. But it really is. I feel like awakening was a huge reason for why I allowed myself to take steps into following my intuition and doing this kind of stuff and trying to be a voice in whichever way I can, of empowerment, of love, of peace, you know, because I feel like we need that. We need a lot of that. If we really want to create change, we need that so much. And it was like a devotion to, if my life is so impermanent, if all of us are only here for moments at a time and then we're not, I want to make sure that my life is purposeful, you know, and that I do something with it more than transactional. I don't want to continue to do like a 9 to 5 job where it's just like, can't wait to clock out. Oh, here I am clocking in. Can't wait to clock out again. Oh, it's Monday again. Can't wait for it to be Friday. That was driving my soul insane, you know? It was driving me insane. I was like, I can't do this. Like, if I'm awakening to all of this, the fact that we're on a floating rock and that I am only going to be here for a certain amount of years and that there is so much abundance, we just are so greedy, awakening to all of that really impulsed me into trying to find my purpose and trying to become a voice or some sort of impact and change that I could do to try and do that. And whew, I feel like this is like one of the first times that I'm able to really vocalize it in this way, but that's my truth, you know? And so it was really inspiring and really beautiful to listen to other people that are doing the same in their own way. And I'm not saying like I agree with everyone and how they're doing it and their way of seeing things, but I think at the root of it all, everyone agrees that we need to start questioning more. You know, we need to start thinking for ourselves. We need to get to know ourselves. We need to not be shadows. We need to be light. And and I mean that in the sense of like, not because I know there's like shadow work and you know that kind of stuff, but more so like not to be followers, right? Like to be leaders in our own lives, whatever that may mean for you, to really be willing to stand in your truth that you're finding about who you are and what you want and what you believe in. It's like an embodiment, right, of the things that you think about, but not just embodiment when it's convenient, embodiment in life, your full life, the integration part that I talked about in the beginning of the episode. So again, thank you for sticking around. I know it was a little bit all over the place, but I hope that this serves whoever it's meant to serve. And sometimes I'm like, I don't want to talk to awakening, porque también sometimes that, like, como que it takes away from the conversations, like it doesn't serve anyone to be like talking all of these terms when it's not going to serve the conversation. But I trust that this is going to be heard by those that need to hear it. And I'm looking forward to hearing back from any of you that resonated with this episode. If you want to hear more about it, if you have questions, let me know. I would love to continue this conversation. And I'm so happy that this episode is finally like being put on the podcast, because I think it was about time. I can't believe how fast this year and a half has gone by, and I've always thought of like, I need to make an episode about awakening from my perspective, or kind of talk about it, and I hadn't. So I'm so happy that it's here. I hope that some of you resonate with it, and I think that's it for now. Okay, FirstGen, thank you so much for tuning in. Please share this with your amigas, amigos, amigues that you feel would find this interesting or helpful. Or maybe you're like, I'm not that much of a weirdo, but I know one. Send it to them. I'm sure they're going to thank you for it. So thank you for tuning in. Thank you for sharing. Follow the podcast if you don't already. And one last reminder, if you are wanting to work one-on-one with me, right now is your opportunity. You have the discount code. I have 2 spots open for Pasos Firmes. I have availability open for one-to-one sessions. And I added for that actually a sliding scale. So that's something new to my offerings. So lots to check out in the description. I'll leave it all linked. Cuídense mucho. And remember, FirstGen, that I love you, I love me, and I can't wait for you to love yourself.